Everyone loves beautiful, graphically designed emails, but should we even be using images in our email in the first place? And if so, what's the best way to be doing it? Hey there, it's Matthew Warner, and this is the Finding Uno Show. Welcome to the Finding Uno Show. Who's Uno? Oh, you know Uno. He's that one lost sheep the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after, and we are here to help you find him. I'm your host, Matthew Warner. I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Sewell. What's going on today, Matt?
Not a whole lot. Another great day to talk about church communications, right?
Yes, definitely. So this is the topic today. We're going to talk about graphics. So this is one we wanted to address because it comes up a lot where a lot of church leaders, they want more graphics. They want really neat templates to, make their emails look nicer. So we wanted to kind of dig in a little bit and say, what's the idea here? Should we even be doing this? Is it good practice? To what extent? How should we be using images in our emails? Do you like emails with lots of pictures in them, Matt?
I think the answer to that would be it depends, because there's a lot of different, there's a wide spectrum of what images can mean, because it could be word art from Microsoft Word that's saved and copied and pasted in there, right? Or the age-old clip art. But there's some really good ones. Like if, there's like a church festival or something that, my family and I went to, and it shows a bunch of, like I actually just got one from my church last weekend there's been a bunch of wildfires here in Washington, and our church organized a big trailer load of cases of water to send up north to some of the churches who have had people lose their homes and livelihoods and all this stuff, along with gift cards and stuff. And so they sent a bunch of pictures of, the trailer and the gift cards of the priest who got, to disperse to his parishioners and all this sort of thing. So yeah, I would say it depends. When done well, yes. Maybe that's kind of a cop-out answer, but when done well, yes. But I would say if you overdo it in any of the gimmicky ways, or if it's just an image for its own sake and doesn't actually have a purpose, then maybe not so much.
Yeah. So I here's how I think about it, and I think this hopefully will help people assess how they use images in here. We'll talk about a few points here, but so first of all, images are powerful. I mean, we're visual creatures. If you look at all the social media trends on what gets engagement and what gets people's attention, it's visual, it's videos, it's pictures. That's what catches your eye, not just text, right? So that's really powerful. A picture can speak 1,000 words. But I think when a lot of church leaders are using images, a lot of times, or at least when we see it in emails, it's like we're sticking an image just for the sake of having an image. So if you look at the image and ask yourself, what are the 1,000 words that this image is speaking? Is it important? And is it part of my message for this email? So I think the right image can be really powerful in an email. Most images used in emails are kind of fluff, distractions, and in most cases, probably hurting the effectiveness of the email, I think, in our experience. So we wanted to help people think a little bit, be more intentional with the images that they use. I think a lot of mistakes we see too with images is like you made a beautiful flyer for, say, an event that you're printing out, you're handing it out. Maybe you're using it in other contexts on your website, whatever. But then they just take the graphic image of the flyer, pop it into an email, send that out. So not a good practice for multiple reasons. So one, some people don't load images in their email. And so they're not going to get the benefit of that. They're going to get it and it's not going to say anything. So, but probably the biggest reason is because most people do load the images in there. The biggest reason is that if usually that graphic image is not made for mobile. And so they might be able to read it fine if they open on their desktop, but probably most of your members are opening their email on their phone or, mobile device. And so it's much smaller and you usually can't read those flyers very well. And you're having to zoom in just to get the text and read what's on it. So it's not a great experience. It's not how you should use email in that sense. It's just to pop a flyer in there and send it out. Every channel needs to be catered to a little bit. And in many cases, just taking the text from that image and putting it into the email is going to be much more effective in terms of an email. So that's a mistake we see made. Another mistake I think is sort of the obsession with some of the fluffy, I call them fluffy images, where it's like they just want a pretty template because it's kind of fun to do. And I think when like 10, 15 years ago, when email marketing was sort of taking off and people were getting a lot more it was really the technology of email inboxes were much better to where you could actually get these sort of more fancy, fancily styled emails that looked really nice. When that started, it was kind of a gimmicky thing, but you would see lots of interesting templates and themes and backgrounds and all this neat decoration that went around it. And it was neat because it was novel, but we're kind of past that now with our email. Like we don't really want to see novel, that's cool that they somehow figured out how to make something pretty show up in an inbox. Like we're past that now.
You mean like the old websites with the houndstooth background with the dancing banana 17 times around the church logo, right?
So it went through the same phase with websites, of course, too, where it was like, oh, look, we can do this neat thing, so therefore we will. But now we moved on to why are we doing it and what's the purpose of putting it there? And I think that's how we have to think about our email too, where we don't want to just have fluff for the sake of fluff. Now there's, or to make it because it's novel, because it was fun. And I think a lot of times when we're the ones making the email, we can get distracted and we can spend 90% of our time formatting it and trying to make it look nice and 10% of the time on the words that are in it, when really it should be the other way around. The words are much more important. The content is much more important. We should be spending 90% of the time on the words we're writing in it and 10% of the time on the styling. And so normally there's a temptation to get caught up with, it's like when you start a band and you have all the fun naming the band and coming up with your logo and taking the band pictures, but like how much time do you spend actually writing the songs? and I think it's similar with, you can get distracted with the fun parts like that, but the hard parts, which is something that needs more time. And so don't fall into that trap as well. But the main thing is to be intentional. So just like with your words that you're putting into your email, is to say, what's the purpose of this email? What do we want it to achieve? And then say, how is this image going to help us achieve that or not? So if you're running a capital campaign, a lot of times a visual of, number one, maybe what you're trying to build. Like if you're trying to build a beautiful church, a picture of that church speaks 1,000 words. If you are like the example you gave, you're like helping people in need for a crisis. Having a picture of who you're helping, of the help that's being done, speaks 1,000 words and is very powerful and will move people to want to support it even more. If you have a graphic sometimes that might show it like a chart or a bar graph that shows here's how we're doing on our capital campaign or here's our progress, that's really powerful because it's a quick way to communicate a lot of information in a small space. So those are great uses of images. But you want to be intentional with it and ask yourself, what's my purpose of this email? What's the message I want to get across? And then say, is this image in some way improving that more than just saying it?
Yeah. Well, it seems like the underlying principle, which I know we've talked about before, aside from being intentional, aside from, not doing I didn't have time to write you a short email, so I wrote you a long one. Like even before that, how often do church leaders and probably even, people in businesses who are sending out marketing emails and whatever, assume that the people receiving the email want to read it? It seems like we should always assume the opposite, that like, again, they have their finger on the unsubscribe button or something like I forgot that I'm subscribed to your list. And so this isn't worth my time. So I'm going to unsubscribe. Like that maybe should be more of the default position, it sounds like, and then write it for that person. So that that way we're not going to put a bunch of fluff in there. We're going to make sure it's easily skimmable. We're going to make sure that it's really lean, right? Like the email itself, like everything is shot through with meaning, but even if a person just scrolls through it, they can get the main 2 or 3 points that you're trying to get across in, 5 seconds. Cause I mean, it is absurd that our attention spans these days are like 8 seconds or something. We form an opinion in like a split second, but then we're onto something else in 6 to 8 seconds. But that's the reality. And I think as church communicators, you have to be operating from that place, right?
Yeah, and that brings up another point too. When you're using images in some way, where it goes in the message can matter too. So you have, if it's really important, it might go at the top. If that's what you're trying to communicate, you want to grab someone with a visual, great. But sometimes we stick an image that's kind of secondary, which it might be helpful, but it's kind of secondary and it's at the top. And then someone has to scroll down to actually get to what the message is about. So keep that in mind too. They call it above the fold on a website, but it's basically in your email too. It's what can they see before they scroll? You want them to see the meat of the message. What's the point? What's going to grab them? What's the point of it? And so make sure if they can see all that without having to scroll down. Which brings me to one little final point I want to make with using images. It can be a great way to consistently get your brand across. So a lot of churches, the way that they're going to be using images regularly might not be adding sort of focal point images for the message of the email, but it might be a header image, or it might be some sort of design element that makes the email more beautiful. It maybe ties the theme together with your website and your logo and the colors you kind of use, or a liturgical season or something else. But there's some other sort of meaning to it, to the aesthetic. But that's important. So you can have a nice looking design. Being consistent is really important too. So a lot of times we see those images flopping out or swapping out too often. And that can throw people off too. So when they open it, kind of you're training people, especially with your regular emails, you're training people where to look for the important information. And so if it moves around too much and isn't consistent each week, that can be more work for them, but if they open it up and they get, oh, there's the nice header, I know right under that, I'm going to get the main message or the headline, and they can kind of go from there. That helps. So being consistent will make it more professional and more beautiful when you think about using design elements. But again, you don't want to have like your header image for maybe it's your logo or some sort of header images that you use in your email every week, but have it be so big that when you open up the email, that's all you see every week. And then you have to scroll down to actually get to the real information. You want to make it small enough. You want to make it small enough so that, people, it's not taking up a redundant amount of space every week saying the same thing. So that's just one little last thing to think about as you're using images in your email, and really images anywhere, is to be intentional, and understand what they're trying to achieve. And then you can oftentimes come up with really powerful images that will help you achieve that. But make sure you're being intentional about it.
Yeah. So we hope that's helpful. We'd love to hear your own experience with this. If you've tinkered, remember ABT, always be tinkering, right? So if you've tinkered with one thing over another or whatever, leave a comment if you're seeing this on YouTube, or leave a reply if you've got this in an email from us. We'd love to hear your stories of what's borne out to be true or not, or what's helped or not. But we hope that's helpful for you in terms of the context of images and email. But now it's time for our listener question. So we'll head over to our People Got Church Problems segment. Okay, so our question today is from Paul. Paul says, change. People don't like it. My parish administration is mostly made up of older parishioners, and they just don't want to change. This is a revolutionary thing in church life, right? We have always done it this way. Why change? They say they don't want to embrace new ideas. I think the last word that he wanted to include there was help. Like, what do I do?
Yes. Yeah. So it's obviously he's picking on old people here. He said he's an old person himself. I remember when he wrote that in. But we all don't like change. I think we all get used to things. Some of us are more used to things changing than others. And I know the older I get, the more I'm satisfied with the things I know that work. And so I get it. And but I think it's important as a church that you look at the results you're getting. And if you like those results, maybe you shouldn't change. If you don't like the results, then you have to change, because it's insanity to keep expecting different results if you're doing the same thing. And so I think that kind of gets to the heart of what I usually tell people like Paul, because we hear this a lot where someone wants to implement something new. They want to try new technology like Flocknote. They want to improve things, and they're getting all kinds of resistance. And I think that sort of the main advice I give is the change can't just be about change. And so that's the perception a lot of times. And I think it's a good question for someone to ask who doesn't want to change is why? Why are we changing? How is this going to help? And a lot of times, those of us, and I've been the one a lot of times driving, hey, we should change this or do something new. A lot of times I realize I don't have a good answer to that in the past. And so it was a good question. Why should we change? Because I was just changing because everyone else was changing. We're going to adopt this new thing because everyone else is adopting this new thing. And so we should have an answer to that. And oftentimes we are changing just for the sake of changing. And so we should check ourselves to make sure that I'm not just changing because everyone else is changing, or I'm changing because I want to do something new, or because I like change, or because it's interesting to do something new because I'm bored with the old way, right? There's lots of bad reasons we could be trying to make changes. And so it's a really healthy conversation to have within your church. And we should be able to answer that question really well. And I think what happens, those people that are very resistant to change, they may not be as interested in change for change's sake like we are, the people who are often driving the change, because we're usually early adopters of new technology or new things or whatever. We're not only comfortable with it, we're excited about it. But we want to get down below that to say, why are we changing, and tap into what they're passionate about. So those people that often don't want to change for change's sake are still passionate, hopefully, about your ministry. They are hopefully passionate about your church community and its mission. And so we have to be able to tell that person, I'll just give you an example. Maybe you're going to your faith formation director and they have this event every couple of months or something that they invite all the members to come to. Maybe it's a speaker, or it's a session they do studying a certain topic. And you go to that person and say, hey, let's implement this new tool. I think it'll be really cool. And they're like, no, I don't want it. Why would I want to do that? I like the way we've always been doing it. This works. It's a hard thing to sort of respond to. But I think if you say, well, are you happy with how many people are showing up to that event? And they go, well, I mean, I wish a lot more people were coming. Not near enough people know about it or come to it. And you say, well, what if I could double the attendance to that event next month? Now they go, well, okay, if you could do that, now all of a sudden I'm interested in the change a little bit more. And so that's just one small example, but get down to the why. And especially for that person you're trying to convince, is tap into what they're passionate about, and then connect whatever change you're trying to make with achieving that goal, or satisfying that passion in some way, or solving that pain point in some way that person has. And if you can't do that, maybe you shouldn't be changing anyway. But if you can, all of a sudden you get a lot more people on board.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thanks again, Paul, for that question. So that does it for this episode of the Finding Uno Show. Again, please subscribe, rate, review, hit the notification bell if you're seeing us on YouTube, so you're always notified of new episodes. But we're really grateful that all of you have been listening and watching. But we have one last thing before we go. We're going to kick it over to our friend Liz to find out where Uno is today.
Howdy, everyone. San Diego, California has arguably some of the best weather in the country, but Chris Karstens from the St. Joseph Cathedral in San Diego will still need something to keep his feet warm when the temperatures do drop during the winter months. So good thing he's prepared, because he has his flock socks. Thank you so much for sending us this photo, Chris. We absolutely love it. In this episode, we discussed using images in your emails. So speaking of images, our image library here at Flocknote is updated each month with free header images that you can add to your emails. We always have some great seasonal options in there for feast days, holidays, and so much more. So be sure to check that out periodically, and feel free to use those to easily elevate your emails. Also, please don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Finding Uno Show.